Hey, Cancer Warriors, it's Tonya with Power Pantaloons podcast, and today we have with us Jill Patton. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Tanya. Thank you for having me. This is lovely to be part of your project. I love this.
I am so excited to talk to you today. So, you are a cancer survivor. So, where do you want to start? Do you want to start at the beginning, the end, somewhere in the middle?
I let's it's kind of start at the beginning-ish. Let's start at the
Okay.
beginning-ish because it was a while ago. It was almost what year is it? It's 2024. So it's 14 years ago, like right now. 14
Okay.
years ago, right now, I was in the middle of this. So I think it was April of 2010. Yeah. I got a call from work from my primary care doc and I was expecting like it's an all clear, but it wasn't an all clear. I but it so a year before I had found a lump in my left breast off to the side, and I'm very compliant. I'm a firstborn. My dad was a pharmacist. I just always do what I'm told, and so that was a good thing in this case. I went in and they're like, "Hey, that's just a lymph node. Don't worry about it. Come back in a year though." So I did. I came back like almost exactly a year later. They're like, "Hey, that's a lymph node still, but the mammogram is different." So before it was not the breast tissue wasn't dense, it wasn't fibrocystic, and now it was, which was a red flag. So despite that, despite like having two mammograms in 2 years to be like, what's going on here? I was still like completely blindsided because I was 40 years old. I was healthy. I did yoga 3 times a week. I was kind of a flexitarian. I had a pretty healthy diet. Breast cancer does or did not run in my family. Um, so
Interestingly enough, they really harp about the genetics, right?
but
Um,
it's
It's not. It's like 5 to 8%
yeah,
is genetic, and the rest of it is environmental or toxins. But they're not going to talk to you about that because they don't want to address that elephant.
exactly. I mean, this is sort of the weird dark humor I have, but I remember talking to my dad, the pharmacist, about like what the heck. And I'm like, did I stand in front of a microwave too long? Like, what did I do? And he's like, you're never going to know. You just won't know what happened. You got it. Interestingly, or not, I mean, since I was diagnosed with breast cancer, an aunt on my dad's side and a cousin on my dad's side both also were very different situations. But now we do have it in the family for whatever that's worth. So, yeah, so that lymph node was still there,
It
but
was the
now,
same lymph node,
yeah,
still inflamed.
I can still feel it. It's still there.
So
Actually, I don't know. Take that
weird.
back. I don't know if I do or not. I'm lymph nodey. I'm lymph nodey. Yeah. So anyway, I think one of the things that really hit me with that, I mean, I don't know if you have come to this or you've talked about this with other people, is how it was sort of an assault to my identity. Like, wait a minute,
Oh, ooh, ooh.
right?
Oh
Right.
yeah.
I'm the healthy one. What gives? What did I do wrong? So there was this weird shame around it
Mhm.
because I got a lot of flack for being the healthy one, right? People at work teased me, my family teased me, and then here I was with a diagnosis. Now, I will say it was a best case scenario as far as the diagnosis goes. It was a ductal carcinoma in situ or in situ. What is it? In situ, I think. And I think it's even considered a somewhat controversial thing whether that's technically cancer because they're abnormal cells in the ducts of the breast that have not yet become invasive. So yet is that sort of,
Okay, so precancer.
but in my case, it was a high grade cancer cell. And it's not like in school where like a high grade is a good thing. High grade is a bad thing. And it was moving fast.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, I was so like this ability to deny what's happening is crazy because I was reading about DCIS and really high cure rates, best case scenario kind of situation. Like my dad's like, well, if you're gonna get cancer, that's the one to get. I'm like, okay, dad. But
So you actually found out over the phone.
yeah,
Wow.
from my new price. So it was one of those things where you're like wondering what's going on. I had recently had to move from my primary care practice because the company I work for had switched insurance provider. So I was now in a different hospital system. So it was a new doctor that I had met once who called to tell me this.
Oh,
And
fun.
yeah, but here's a interesting twist. So I went in. Oh, as I talk about the denial, I was like looking at the mammogram, and I'm thinking, and I'm reading about lumpectomies. I'm like, well, there are a lot of little lumps. How are they going to get all those lumps out of there? Like the word mastectomy just didn't enter my brain. Like I just couldn't until I'm standing at the breast surgeon's office in this new hospital system, which is fine. I mean, I wouldn't have known her anyway, right? She would have been new to me anyway. But she says the word mastectomy to me, and I'm like, well, I'm 40 years old, and I just finished breastfeeding like a year and a half before. Like I just like, what
Yeah.
do you mean? And she said, here's the deal. Your cancer is breast threatening, not life threatening at this point. So I was like, all right, I kind of regrouped. And she said, actually, because of, good fortune, your general good health, how we caught it so early, there's a surgeon in this new hospital system where I didn't used to go who was skilled at a form of breast reconstruction that at the time didn't exist in the Midwest. I was in Kansas City at the time. And she said, I suggest you go talk to her. And if she agrees, we can put this off long enough for you to get on her schedule. So not only was I in a really fortunate position in terms of early diagnosis, I mean, I did ask, was this thing coming at me like a freight train? She's like, this thing was coming at you like a freight train. If you hadn't gone in for that lump, if you hadn't come back when we asked you to, there really were no symptoms. There's a little discharge, which I didn't even really notice because I'm like, busy with my life. I was kind of like, whoa, moved. Like it didn't even, right?
Right. It didn't even register
It
that
didn't
this might
even
be. Yep.
register. And if by the time this was in April, if by my June annual physical, which I would have gone to because I'm compliant, but if by June it might have occurred to me, like, what is this? Maybe. At which point I would have been looking at a completely different prognosis and diagnosis. I mean, that's how fast it was moving.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no, I absolutely had a very aggressive cancer as well. So I understand.
yeah, I mean, when you think about it like that, and there were two cancers, they found the ductal carcinoma, which had been upgraded to stage 1 micro, but the oncologist was like, see ya. I'm like, see ya. But there was also Paget's disease, which is a rare cancer of the nipple. Um,
Oh,
so there was that. So it was looking back, I was like, wow, dodge that bullet. What a great thing. In the moment, of course, I and everybody I knew were completely freaked out, right? My kids were
yeah.
3 and 9. We were living in a 1,000 square foot house, 2 blocks from my parents-in-law, 1 mile from my mom. My husband had just left his job and was job searching, so he was home. I had a toddler and a grade schooler. I was on short-term disability. 60% pay of nothing.
Of no,
So I
yep.
mean, yeah. And my husband he's like the caregiver in our family. He does the cooking, he does the shopping. Like his love language is to make me food. And one of the amazing things, and I can talk about this, was like how much, I mean, I was the first one of anybody my age to have a thing like this, like to have some sort of health crisis. And people would come through the woodworks. But then he was displaced. Like he was out of the kitchen because people were bringing food. So like it was very stressful because he was not working. I was not working. We had these little kids who didn't know what was going on. We were sitting on top of each other in this house. And people
Right.
were all over I mean, and it was wonderful and stressful.
But not, but not because now he also had an identity crisis because he couldn't
Yes.
be the support he's always been for you because now
Yeah.
there's a flock of other people in his space
Yeah.
because of your
Totally.
diagnosis. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And and he talked about, for years he couldn't drive past that hospital. And in my world, like once she said not life threatening, like, yeah, I was stressed. And I'm not going to say like it was easy sailing, but like I regrouped. Like my brain kind of went, okay, I went into project management mode or like, or like, here's how we're going to do this. Here's how I'm going to think about it. And he didn't have that because he just had to wait and watch.
It's very interesting that the words that the doctor says to you that you accept as truth,
Mm,
how it impacts your healing journey. I, I was
yeah.
given a 5% chance of survival, and I literally said, no, thank you. I disagree with that.
Hmm.
And I said, we're not talking about that. I don't
Hmm.
want any expiration dates or any of that horseshit. No,
No,
the
no.
plan is to kick cancer's ass. And
Yes.
and it really is just putting your mind to project manage, right? Like you like go into almost remote kind of rote doing things, right? So that you don't actually have to think about that. For me,
I
the thinking
yeah.
about that happened after all of the,
You get through the, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I heard something once. My sister told me this. I'm sure she didn't make this up, but like, you believe the diagnosis, not the prognosis. Like, I bet you could argue that you don't necessarily have to believe the diagnosis either, but like, you can tell me what this is, but don't don't tell me what my body can or can't do to to move through this.
yes, because honestly, like I was diagnosed at 38 and I was in absolute abysmal shape, like in health. I really almost 400 pounds and
Wow.
just not in good shape at all. And but I decided I was kicking cancer.
Yeah.
And you know, telling the oncologist, awesome, I'm willing to go through your standard of care treatment plan, the surgery, the chemo, the radiation. And I, however, we are also doing Reiki, aromatherapy, herbs. And he rolled his eyes at me and
Did
says,
he?
he did, as long as you're not putting it in your mouth, I don't care. And I said, what about the herbs? He's like, no. And I said, why? And he said, because they will contraindicate the chemo. And I was like, huh, that's kind of what I want to do, right? Like, I had never heard of rescue drugs.
I don't either. What is that?
Yeah, drugs that give you before the chemo, during the chemo, or after, or all three, because the chemo's so toxic,
Yeah.
they need to give you rescue drugs. The drug that they gave me was called cisplatin, and it was so toxic. I had to be inpatient because I got the 4 hours before, during, and then 4 hours after, and the time I had to be receiving the IV was 16 hours, and that means that you're inpatient instead of outpatient. So I got 4 days of that a month. Then I got to
Oh
go
my.
home and recuperate for a month, and then do it again.
And what year was this?
2007.
Okay.
And I got what he called it, a chemotherapy radiation sandwich. And I said, no, thank you. I'll have the tuna. But basically, I got 3 chemo treatments, and then I got a short break. And then I had 5.5 weeks of radiation. And then I got a short break. And then I had more chemo. It was a very grueling year.
That sounds horrible.
It was at the time.
So, okay, so what I health coach in me is like, so what what resources did you draw on? I mean, you talked about Reiki, you talked about this energy work and the like, what did you rely on when you were going through that?
The first thing I relied on was every day I visualized that I was putting on Wonder Woman's underwear, because to me Wonder Woman doesn't die, and it was the most religious thing I did, right? Every day when I got dressed in the morning, that is the thing I did. And there were days where I physically couldn't actually change my clothes, but I still visualized putting on Wonder Woman's underwear, because I mean she's so amazing, right?
Right,
So I feel like that was that me actively deciding to live every day, that making the conscious choice, because it is a choice. I have literally seen people take their diagnosis, accept it, and lay down and die.
right,
And I was not going to do that. I
right.
had the absolute most amazing support group. not just my friends and family, but also my medical team. They were spot on. Was there any mental health provided in that? No, zero. But I had my flower essences, I had my Reiki, I had detoxifying uh massages, I had raindrop technique aromatherapy, I had singing bowls and dancing under the moon and
Oh,
walking on I mean just
did you
all,
know about these things already, or did you
yes.
discover them? Yeah. Okay. They were in your
Since I was little, I was always interested in the alternative because I really believe that you need mind, body, spirit to
yeah,
heal, and you
yeah,
can't just heal the symptom.
right.
So all of that played a big portion of me surviving. It really did.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And here we are.
Because right. It's been 17 years. I celebrated that back in March. And I talked to a whole bunch of different people. And I always ask them, like, do you have a cancerversary? And if so, was it diagnosis date? Was it the day you rang a bell? I didn't get to ring any bells. Nobody told me about bells when I went through it, or something else. Like,
Well, and so coming back to this identity thing, here's the thing. I mean, like I was like, oh yeah, I was right around now. What year is it? Like I don't. And part of it has to do, like talked about identity at first, right? Like I was like, oh, now I'm the person who has cancer and all that. But on the back end, what I've realized, and this is over the last several years, and I haven't landed on this yet. I haven't figured out how I feel about this yet. But I resist, there's something in me that resists the phrase cancer survivor because I was never sick a day. I didn't have chemo, I didn't have radiation. I had a big reorganizing surgery, and I was under for 16 hours with this particular technique. It was very, very cool. Every time I go to the doctor, like, those are great. I'm like, I know. But in my mind, when she said not life threatening, when the surgeon said, here's what we're going to do, and I trusted both of them a lot, then it was like this thing that I had to go through, like having a hysterectomy, like having any other thing tended to. I was never sick. So it's really hard for me to put myself in the same, to have a conversation with a woman who's lost her hair, who's lost her breasts, who didn't have a successful reconstruction, who maybe like, couldn't have children afterward, or, all those things that could happen didn't happen to me. And
that doesn't
so,
make your survivorship any less valid.
and that's what people say to me. They're like, it doesn't make your survivorship any less valid. I'm like, yeah, okay, that's cool. And also, when I think about the things that are like the bad things that have happened in my life, this is like down number 3 to 5. Like, this isn't even at the top,
Yep.
you know? So, that said, here I am. I'm very grateful to be here. I'm very grateful to not have breast cancer. I know now, I mean, there have been a lot of lessons, right? I know now that I could be sitting at my desk and get a phone call.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know now how I handled that. And you know, we were talking about like what you leaned on, and I, again, being like the first one of my friends to go through a thing like that. Um,
Yeah.
and I'd been doing yoga for a long time. I had done yoga teacher training. And my sort of aha moment in that situation when, yes, I'm not going to die, but things are blowing up and crazy and we're broken. Everybody's in our house and, the kids are little and, it's just that insanity moment. I remember being in my yoga. Have you ever done a yoga class? If I've been in my yoga teacher training and we were doing this pose, like a high runner's lunge, so you've got your right foot in front of you and your left foot back and you're up, your knees up off the floor. And then you raise your arms overhead, which I'd probably done 100 times, and every time my front quad is shaking. And in that teacher training, we were instead talking about the energy of the pose. So the values in yoga, like the winds. And so we were drawing in and expanding out and rooting down. So I, in that class, rooted down through my front foot, right? So really root down through your front foot, push back through your back leg energetically, lift your pelvic floor, lift your thigh towards the thigh bone, lift your heart, and just like this movement of energy through my body. And all of a sudden, my quad didn't hurt anymore. It's like it was being dispersed in all these different directions. And when I was, trying to figure out how I was going to move through this experience, I'm like, okay, it doesn't have to be the front quad. It doesn't have to be one thing, just like shaking miserably and being like suffering, right? Like, how do I disperse this
Yeah.
energetically? What does that look like? And so I put together the things that I needed for me, and I did. I went to acupuncture. I got a treatment right before I went into surgery. My aunt brought in someone who knew healing touch, and she came into the hospital. I will say they didn't bat an eye. She was wearing a white coat. They got out of her way. She did her thing. Like nobody gave her guff, which was awesome. But then I also had friends and family. I was going to say, so the person who called right before we got on the call is my friend Katie. I've known her since I was 16. She had 3 little kids at the time too. She had no time to help me,
Yeah.
but she did. She put out the call to like everybody I could think of. This, I don't remember. I think Caring Bridge existed at the time, but maybe I either didn't know about it or didn't want to use it because this wasn't like a ongoing thing requiring updates. This was like I one. So I brought this. Do you see this?
Yeah.
So this is filled with messages that she collected via email and mail. Like, so she sent out the word and people sent her little slips of paper or sent her messages on email and she printed them on little slips of paper. And there are like hundreds of pieces of paper in here of people, like
Wow.
like people like, do you remember when we were little, blah, 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 or messages of like just quotes of strength and hope, or just all these messages, and I pull them out every once in a while, and they're they can make me cry. And the other thing is, like, there are people in here I don't remember who they are. Like, there are people in here like who sent me something who was like, maybe they worked at the affiliate of the company I worked for, who I probably talked to twice, sent me something. I'm like, that's amazing to me.
It is. It's beautiful. You're making me cry, right? You're making me cry. That's such an amazing story.
What?
Um,
Yeah.
I
And then, yeah.
I I have a uterus jar. It's a jar that's I like and it has some herbs and stuff in it, but it also has so once I found out that I definitely was gonna lose my hair, I said to my one of my friends at the time who was a cosmetologist, I'm like, I'm 38, I'm having my first mohawk. And she's like, let's do it. So we did the mohawk and I rocked the mohawk for like a week or two before I went in for my first round. And the night before I went in officially, we shaved the rest of the hair, and I have that ponytail in that jar, right? Like, and it's. I know it sounds really weird, and I this is actually the first time I brought about it, talked about it on the podcast.
Cool.
Um, yeah, it's really cool, and I dust it and move it around, and it sits with all the pictures and all, like, all the
Right.
knickknacks, right? Like, it's in the knickknack area, but it it is, right? Like, it's part of the identity from that time.
Yeah.
And that you talk about identity, right? For me, I didn't have the identity crisis until afterwards, and I was
Mm,
upset, and my friend said to me, of course you're depressed. The thing that defines you as a feminine being tried to murder you.
right.
And I was like, oh. And then I spent the next 5 years unpacking that garbage, right? Like, because with a lot of the societal nonsense going on, the if you don't have a uterus, you're not a woman thing is, which is absolutely garbage. It is garbage, but coming to terms with the fact that I could never bear my own children. Not that I had wanted to, right? Like, I didn't want to until they removed the equipment. And then look, suddenly I'm like, I need babies. And I knew that that was just like the reaction of it. But I have spoken to so many different survivors who, please don't call me a survivor. I don't like that word. Or I'm not on a cancer journey.
Hmm.
Like, like, and eh, there are different parts of each person's experience that they express in their own way. And some people don't like the word warrior because they feel it invokes war and battle. I'm like,
Right.
I don't know how else you would describe fighting for your life, but like
Well,
maybe
I
you
mean,
had a different,
well,
you know.
here and here's, I mean, so I haven't, so I'm a health coach and I'm also a health journalist. And I kind of think in terms of story a lot, right? And one of the things that you're talking about is one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot lately is we all have a story. And a lot of us are trying to like, we talk about rewriting your story or being more empowered in your story, but we have to honor our story. And that includes how we see what our role was at the time. So, like you, I have an aunt right now. She got breast cancer shortly after I did. Similar diagnosis and prognosis, a little bit different. She did have to have chemotherapy, but it was supposed to be like a one and done. Well, it came back. It's stage 4. She's 70 years old. It's in every bone of her body. She just
Oh
had
God.
surgery yesterday to remove a molar and part of her jaw that has died. So right. She absolutely uses the language of war and warfare and battle. And my boobs try to kill me and all of that. That she's a fiery redhead too, although she doesn't have her hair anymore, but she's a fiery redhead through and through. I had another friend who didn't like that language. And she talked about, I am cohabitating with my cancer. I am trying
Yeah.
to
Yep.
like, I'm trying to live, with this thing that I have to, and she did, she didn't like eschew chemo, like she did her chemotherapy, she did her radiation, she did, I think, a host of alternative treatments as well. So it was just,
Yeah.
and both are right,
Yes. Yes.
right? Both are right.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely. You're
yeah, but
the
that's something
way
that I'm
that,
coming to, right? Like you have to
yes.
give that person time to understand their own experience. That might change with time, might not. But
Yes, right? Like listening to other survivors say, I don't like that word, now has me reassessing, well, how do I really feel about that word? And I think I'm very comfortable wearing it because
yeah,
I have survived many things. It's not just cancer, right? Like
right.
sexual assault, divorced parents. Like there's a whole bunch
Things
of
that you have survived.
trauma that I have made it through, overcome.
Yep.
So I don't like that word, but I do think that there might be better words, right? Like,
Mm.
I'm a holistic healed being, or like, I mean, right? Like, why do we have to use that verbiage? Because I'm gonna go straight back to your mindset. Like, what do you see yourself as? Do
Yeah.
you always want to present as a survivor, or do you want to present as something else?
Healed and whole.
Healed and whole. That's what I would like to present as.
Yeah.
So,
Gosh, and then you can go down all kinds of interesting philosophical rabbit holes there. Like, what is healing? What is
yep.
healing? Can you be a stage 4 cancer patient and with something terminal and still feel healed? What does that mean?
I think so. And the reason that I do, I think like I said earlier, you know, some individuals hear the diagnosis, accept it, they wear it like a cloak, and then they lay down and die.
Mm,
And others are like, absolutely not. We are not doing that today. We are not doing that ever.
mm,
And I think it has everything to do with who you are as a person,
mm.
your whole experience, right? Like, because I would never judge somebody for doing that, right? Like
Right,
I don't know what kind of pain or trauma they've been through
right.
to get to the point where it's okay for them to just accept that and transition to another realm, right? I'm not I'm
That
not that
you're not
was
in their skin. You're not in their
exactly.
skin.
I don't know their experiences. I only know my experiences, and I only know that I'll miss them, and that I'm being selfish by trying to ask them to do something that they don't want to do. And that is a hard peanut to swallow, let me tell you, right? Like loving somebody so much to allow them to make their choices for themselves.
Without judging them.
That's hard. It's
Yeah.
hard, but I think it's part of why we're here, right? Is to learn compassion, and we're all having a human experience, and some days it's absolutely glorious and some days it is not.
And some days it is not. And some days we have the capacity to deal with what's right in front of us. And like moment to moment. It's like, you know what? It's after 5 o'clock. I'm done. I can't deal with this reality right now. Maybe tomorrow morning. Right. And it
Yeah,
changes. It changes. And I like to think it can change. I like to think of a forward trajectory. And that's just who I am and where I am in my life, right? I'm healthy. There's no reason for me to think that anything else is going to happen, but of course there wasn't before. So, I know better. But but it grounds me, or it makes me feel better to think in terms of what lies ahead. And do what I can do to hope that is a positive, healthy thing. Now there's a little twist here that I was just thinking about too. Because I've written about this. And one of the things that came up, I remember I was talking with an editor friend of mine, and she, like, before she assigned me to write this article, and she kind of had the realization that prior to cancer, all of my like good habits had a fear underpinning to them, right?
mm,
I'm going to eat well. I'm going to do these things because yes, I want to live well, but I also don't want to die. And after, you're like, okay, well, okay, that happened. And I still don't want to get sick. I still don't want to die early. I still want to live, health span and lifespan. All those things are still important to me. But I also realize that you can add a lot of stress and a lot of negativity to trying to do things right, to trying to, you know, eat the right things, move the right way, do all the right practices, because, really you're afraid of what will happen if you don't, as opposed to doing things that support your health and well-being because they feel good, or because you love what possibilities they open up for you. And that's a thin slice. Like that's a skinny line to walk, right? Like
yes.
how much of this kale is fear and how much of it is love? I don't know.
Honestly, for kale, for me, all of it is fear, because I
Oh, I like kale. I do like kale. But do I like kale because I learned to like it?
right, right,
I
like
don't know. But yeah. So
yeah,
it
yeah,
is interesting that, like, what are we doing that's fear designed to look like good habits?
yes. So going back to the you know some days are not as good as others, and the rest and recuperation, sometimes I go through it with um the mindset that I'm playing a video game, and
Mm,
right, and well, what do your Muppets do when they need to regain stamina? They rest and they eat, right? So
yeah.
go do those things when you have had enough, right? Like your bar of bullshit is just too full. So you got to go and let that bar come down. So go have a snack, go have a relax,
Take
you
a
know,
walk around the block.
exactly, like whatever is calming and relaxing to you, whether it's reading a book, whether it's sitting on the couch, and cuddling the animals, like whatever it is, right? Like, so,
Hmm.
you know like, sometimes I really feel like I'm a sim, and I'm playing the video game, you know.
Yeah. I love that idea. And it makes you feel. I saw a meme the other day, and it was this woman, or I don't know if I'm using that term right, but it was a little clip it. And she was sitting on her bed, and then she hears a noise and she pops up, and it's like when you can't even relax enough that, like, your spouse comes home and you have to act busy. Like, she was just relaxing, but God forbid anyone see her like not producing.
I- yeah, that's a whole lot to unpack, isn't it?
Yeah,
Right?
I do that all the time. I'm like, oh man, don't anyone let me see me doing something being a slacker.
Oh, you know, there's a whole bunch of stuff that we were fed that we need to unbox and give right back. You can have this. I don't require this anymore.
There you go.
Yeah, you know, I have been acting so like I really love the concept of alter egos and improving yourself and things like that, right? Like I because I honestly I think that that was part of the whole Wonder Woman underwear thing, right? Like I borrowed from the post that persona to give me the strength that I needed. So I'm
Amazing.
actually building my very own Tonya character sheet, right? Like what are my skill points, right? And what do I want it to look like? So how do I get it there by improving like so I'm making it fun to exercise,
Mm-hmm.
to do the things like chores and stuff that I don't want to do, right? Like
You gamify them somehow.
I'm gamifying it, yes.
Yeah.
And it helps. It also helps when you like to me, exercise has always been a punishment. So now we don't use that word in regards to that. We call it recreation because recreation is fun things.
Yeah.
So how are we going to recreate today? We're going to go for a walk, even though I hate walking, but I'd rather ride the tricycle. I have this beautiful, beautiful adult tricycle. Her name is
Ooh,
Tallulah.
Tallulah. Yeah.
She has a horn on her that sounds like a very angry goose. And I just have fun. Like,
Yeah. You
wear the
take
little
her out
sun
around the
hat
neighborhood.
and just go down the neighborhood making goose noises and feeling like a goose, right? Like
I love it.
bringing bringing the joy in where you don't want to do something, right?
Yeah.
Like so you were asking how did I handle my year of my diagnosis, and there was a lot of that. I mean there were days that were so brutal I couldn't get out of bed, and
Yeah.
it would take me 20 minutes to get to the bathroom, but there were days where I felt a lot better, and I would do silly things, I would do fun things, I would do things with my community, you know, and that that was important. And having people in your space, right? Like some people left, right? Because for
Can't do it.
whatever reason they couldn't handle my diagnosis.
Yep. I had that.
Okay, that's valid. I don't know what the reasons were and it doesn't matter, right? Like it's none of my business. Uh, but some people who you never would have expected rise up and
Yeah.
become like amazing heroines or heroes, right? Like, and just suddenly you have casseroles delivered, and you would you do you need to go to the movies? I'll take you to the movies, like, and I just here's some PJs or whatever, right? Like,
Whatever. And you don't like I had to like who are these people? Like
right,
again,
some
people I didn't
acquaintance you met 3 times.
acquaintance, right? Who this hit their heart and they had something they could offer.
Yeah,
And yeah, that's amazing.
yeah, because you
So we
don't
need each
you
other.
don't you don't know what in their life gave them that kind of compassion for what's going on in your life. You don't know what kind of stories they've already experienced with
Yeah.
their circle.
Isn't that something interesting to think about? Because that's the other thing that I've been as I've been sort of thinking more deeply about narrative and story as it relates to health and wellness. Every time you tell your story to someone, you see how they respond, and your story might shift a little bit, right? Because or they respond to you in a way that adds a little bit of nuance to your understanding of your own story. So what
Yes.
you were just saying was like, you know, here you are, whatever situation you have, and you got a diagnosis, you're dealing with it. Someone in your orbit, maybe they had a great aunt, or they saw someone else do something. Like if I ever had the opportunity, you don't know what it was, but their story intersects with your story becoming part of your story.
It's a beautiful tapestry, right?
It
You
is a
never know where the weaves
beautiful,
come from.
God. Yeah, I mean, I just had this vision of like these threads,
Yeah,
right? Oh, I love that.
yeah. I
Ooh.
mean, that really is what it is. And sometimes people are in your life for just that one moment.
And okay, so back to my friend Katie. That's exactly the, so the one who put together the love jar and other things, by the way. She was like if you need a PR person when you have cancer, call her. but but I was telling her, like I was preparing for this and something else. I was like, I looked at this love jar and also had a box full of like cards and stuff that I was going through recently. I'm like, I don't remember some of these people. I feel kind of bad about that. She's like, no, 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 no. She's like, those people were in your life, like it was like a season. Those people in your life for a season. And I think we get caught like with social media. Like if you like I'm friends on Facebook with people I knew when I was in grade school, right? Because somebody started that. Like, but in real world, you don't necessarily stay in touch with the people that you knew when you were six. Maybe some of them. But so there are people who, for whatever reason, didn't make it onto your Facebook friend list and or your LinkedIn, but they were like kind of were in your orbit and they sewed their little thread. There was a mixed metaphor, but they sewed their thread on your story tapestry. Oh God, I think I want that's a beautiful metaphor, the tapestry.
So I have a quick little story. While I was going through my chemo, my sister and a couple of friends and I were kind of walking around downtown, and somebody approached me. They called me by name. They clearly knew who I was. I had zero clue who they were. And my mature response was to burst into tears and run away. Like I literally, like that's what I did. And to this day, I still don't know who that person is. And like obviously I feel like garbage about the experience. And I had to be really gentle on myself
Yeah,
about that
yeah,
because chemo brain,
is
chemo
a thing.
fog is a real thing. Everybody's like, until you experience something like that, like I was like, I never want dementia. Because if this is a taste of what dementia is like, please put me down before that happens. I do not want to live in a body where I can't remember people. Like it was
Yeah.
it was so horrifying. And now, like, if I have an occasion, like, because I've definitely been like, hi, nice to meet you. And they're like, we've met before. And I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. Can you please remind me of your name?
I
And,
did that
and,
at a reunion once. I was like,
and
oh,
you know, and it just worked the fact that I had chemo into the
into the
conversation
conversation.
so they don't think I'm this giant asshole.
Well, now that I think we're kind of close in age. Like I'm in my mid 50s now. I was like, well, I mean, and actually, I don't think it's actual memory loss. I think I'm just really busy and my brain is scattered. But like sometimes I'm like, what just happened? I don't know what happened.
It's valid, Jill. It
It's
really is. It's
valid.
super valid. And, you know, like you have these experiences, and if you handle them poorly, you get the opportunity to be better next.
Yeah.
So I learned
Yeah.
from that. And, I don't know if I've encountered this being since. They have not said it,
Remember that time I said hi and you ran away crying?
but I'd know and I'd be able to complete that thread.
Yeah.
But maybe it's not for me to complete. We
You
don't
know
know.
what? And maybe they get to have some compassion for this one. Maybe that's their compassion learning moment.
Maybe, maybe, absolutely. Well, this has been absolutely amazing, Jill. I really appreciate you coming on.
Oh,
And
I'm so glad you asked me. I wasn't, yeah, I had all this self-talk like, well, was I really a cancer survivor? But I mean, I think it's valid to have these conversations. And
it
yes, I was.
absolutely, absolutely. I'm going to be having another interview in a couple of days with somebody who's like, I don't know if it's really cancer. And I'm like, your story is still important, and it does touch around tumors. So I think it counts. She's like, okay, if you think so. Having these conversations brings awareness, especially in this time where now according to the American Cancer Society, your odds of getting some form of cancer before you die is now 1 in 2. When I was diagnosed back in 2007, the number was 1 in 3. Of that,
I hadn't heard that.
uh, the most commonly diagnosed cancer is breast cancer. Men can get breast cancer. 1 out of 8 diagnoses is breast cancer, right? But it's crazy. These numbers are crazy. So, cancer warriors, you know what I'm going to tell you to do, right? We're going to go and we're going to make the appointments for our routine screenings because they are very important, and those will vary based on your age, your gender, and your family history. So you would have to talk to your providers about that. So until next time, go make those appointments, and we'll see you then. Bye.